and welcome to the CBB Super Show brought to you by the FTN Network. I'm, of course, your host, Walter Waddell, aka Dub Deuces 85, out here doing our thing. College basketball Saturday. It's a huge slate of Saturday games, 3 slates in all, a bunch of prop betting and overall betting opportunities. And DFS, we're absolutely going to crush it. Big weekend ahead. If you're new here, what we do is go game by game, covering primarily the main slate on DraftKings, giving our thoughts on each. And also, we'll talk any prize picks, underdog, and betting opportunities. Please show your support, whether you're new or not. Veterans, you guys know what to do. Please make sure you hit that like button if you're watching on YouTube and or Twitter/X. All of those interactions, good or bad, any feedback will help as well. That is the primary way that you can help us on the show, driving those interactions. I do surely appreciate it very, very much. The big thing here is the 11 gamer, which is got a 2K to first. There is a $30 Mania qualifier. So those of you that are trying to get the early seats, there is qualifier number 16. Don't fret, still plenty of opportunities to do so. That is going to be the focus of tonight's show. There will also be coverage throughout tomorrow with projections and context notes for the 9-game afternoon slate and also the 7-game night slate. So a lot of good stuff there happening. So refining projections, watching the Huskies game here just a little bit ago, dropped a close one to UCLA. But we're live now. We're ready to do it. And I think we'll just jump right in, man. Let's just do it, because thinking it's going to be an all-nighter, not really fond or keen on doing those these days, but you know what? It has to be done. So let's get into it. We're going to start with the first game on the slate here, SMU versus NC State. It's a total of 145 with SMU as a 3-point favorite. Now I'm going to pull up the projection sheet here. I had a lot of not a lot, but perhaps trolling. I'm not sure if it's actual feedback. Fine. That I was doing more talking and not enough graphics. I've been doing the show for almost 10 years, and I've pretty much have just been my face talking the entire time, and we've done quite well. You guys supporting the show, so I actually put up graphics, not necessarily graphics, but the projection sheet and throughout the show. So there was those visuals to look at, but apparently it wasn't enough. So apologize for that if it wasn't enough. Let's go into the share screen here, and we'll pull that up right now. All right, let's get rid of all this shit. There we go. All right, so we're going to do it like this. This is what you get when you want these visuals on a self-produced show. This is what you get. All right, SMU. Let's leave them back on there. All right, so to give you something to look at while we're going through the slate here. So starting with the SMU side, yes, 3-point favorites. I do think NC State is a very solid bet on this one. A lot of chatter here. We have some really good members who are highly plugged into the NC State program, so giving me some tidbits and what the coaching staff is saying there. Some interesting stuff. Brendan Hundley-Hatfield is back. There's a lot going on for NC State, and I do think they have a very good chance to win this game, especially being at home. SMU has definitely sprung a leak here recently. Favorite SMU play remains my man Matt Cross, who's priced there at 7.5. He's been steady, even in games where they absolutely get their doors blown off like they just did against Louisville. He still put up a solid 18.8 rebound effort. Pretty much locked into around 30 fantasy points as a floor. Upside for more. He scored 30 plus in 4 of his last 5 games. He's definitely the guy we're going to look to. SMU's a bit of a deep team. Not in love with that here. And they've hit some struggles under Andy Enfield, especially lately. But they're still 14-5 season. Still live for a tournament bid here. Cross, as far as his rates go, they're moderate, 18.6% usage rate, 18.2% shot rate. He does have a combined rebounding rate of 32%. We like that. And he's hitting almost 40% of his triples. So definitely not a lock and load play, not even the posh play like he has been, but he's the most viable SMU guy here for sure, for my money. As far as okay, I think we're on the wrong page here, aren't we? Yes, we are. Might help if I have the right page pulled up. All right. All right, there we go. So you can look at the initial projections here. Like Matt Cross the most, right around 33 minutes, puts him real close to value. As far as everybody else, the Chucky Harris of the world, BJ Edwards, Boopy Miller, all solid options. Prices are fair, especially for a guy like Chuck Harris, who does have upside in this matchup. BJ Edwards has GPP winning ceiling. That has a lot to do with his stocks. He's had games where he's racked up 4, 5, or 6 steals, but it's very hard to rely on somebody like that. So not as much involved with the SMU side here. Now on to the NC State side, where, again, we have a little bit of intel here from Alex and a few others of our NC State brethren. It does sound like there's some hope that they're going to give Dennis Parker Jr. some more minutes. It's uber athletic. They need that versatility. They need somebody to really ignite this team. They don't have that this year, at least not yet. And unlike last year's Final Four team, where they had a lot of personality, they had a clear identity, this team just doesn't really have that. We've seen Jaden Taylor have some good games. We've seen Marcus Hill had some good games, but there's just not a lot of consistency there. They are getting Brandon Huntley Hatfield back. He is listed as available. And good to go. We don't know if there's a minutes minutes cap there on him. I would suspect he plays somewhere between 17 and 20. Somewhat interesting at 4.2K, especially against this SMU front court. They have the 7-footer Yita there, but foul trouble, definitely a possibility for him. If they can get him into early foul trouble, that is going to leave a lot on the inside for NC State to punish with. Perhaps Ben Middlebrooks, who has been an elite rebounder, somebody that we can look at. The most viable NC State DFS play thus far this season has mostly been Jaden Taylor, but his price has steadily increased. He's now sitting there at 6K after another very productive outing against Cal, which was a pretty tough 65-62 loss. They also suffered a 79-76 loss to Virginia Tech and a 63-61 loss to North Carolina. So they've been involved in a lot of close games. No reason to think this one won't be close as well. But NC State definitely needs a W. Now, Dennis Parker Jr., if there's any merit to that, he's only priced at 3.4. If we can get him closer to that 20-minute mark, there's a lot of upside there for him. Virginia Tech in the first half, they played him about 8 minutes in that first half, and he absolutely detonated. Didn't play as much in the second half, and he didn't do as much in the second half, but he really kept them afloat in that first half. Got a steal, got a key block, was grabbing a bunch of rebounds, hitting shots. He was very comfortable, and that's the version of DPJ that I think not only me, but everybody in NC State's program, fan base alike, wants to see. Pulling up the NC State Ken Palm page. DPJ has so much potential. Offensive rebounding rate over 7%, combined rate over 24%. He shoots about 23%, not necessarily on volume, 5 for 22. Block rate over 5%, steal rate over 2%, draws about 2.5 to 3 fouls per 40. He's really raw, still a lot of development, but I feel like Keats needs to kind of just turn him loose and play him those big minutes. Because when you look at the rotation that NC State's been running, you can go to the Cal game there without BHH, or he did come back in that game, excuse me. Minus him, Dennis Parker, Trey Parker, Bryce Hurd, and Breon Pass, really the rest of their bench. Pass, not a lot of upside there. He doesn't defend all that well. He doesn't offer a ton. No reason really he should be playing that many more minutes over Parker. Bryce Hurd and Trey Parker are just freshmen. They're raw, playing a few minutes here or there. So you really look at it, Dennis Parker should be playing more. Also in that same beat writer message and message board stuff that I was reading. Dontrez Styles, another one that they want to see get more minutes. He is uber athletic as well. He's older, more experienced than DPJ. Not as interested in him as a DFS play, but it is interesting that Parker and Styles were the two that were kind of named as players that they want to get more out of. Styles is reasonably priced at 5.8K, but he played 27 minutes against Cal. Wasn't really great there. His offense it doesn't really stay consistent. He doesn't produce a whole lot. He's not much of an option, but the price is certainly intriguing there as a starter, especially if he pushes towards 30 minutes. So winnable game for NC State. They need to win it. I don't think a lot of ownership will come into this game. I think we'll see one that is very, very low owned, very ignored by the masses. You'll see the slate locks there at 9 a.m., 12 p.m. EST. And then half an hour later, we have a string of other games, then the 10 a.m. window. So there's really just that first game locked. And I think a lot of people will ignore it there to buy themselves more time, and also because it's not a comfortable game there. So not saying I'm going to pull the trigger on Dennis Parker as a main team play, but certainly interested. And on the same token, Brandon Huntley Hatfield there at 4.2K. Expect him to get up into that 20-minute range, which certainly going to need him in his size against that SMU front court. All right, next game on the slate here, we have Pittsburgh versus Syracuse. It's a total of 150.5. Syracuse 7.5-point favorites. The Cuse still look like they're going to be without Donnie Freeman, who has not practiced, not been doing much of anything. So do not expect to see him back. Pitt, we thought Guillermo Diaz-Graham was left for dead. He came back to life, and boy, did he have a huge, huge game. Looking at Pitt, this is an absolute phenomenal matchup against a very weak Syracuse team. We know that. There's a myriad of options for Pitt that we can look to. Now, they've been in favorable matchups before. We've mini-stacked them before, and you know what? They've let us down before, but I definitely don't want to get caught with my pants down in this situation. We're going to want some exposure here. Joanne Lowe is the most expensive, high volume, high usage, high minute kid. Playing 44 minutes in that overtime game against Clemson. They nearly pulled it off, did lose 78-75. They lost a puzzling game against FSU, lost a close one against Louisville, got their doors blown off by Duke, and then they handled Stanford in their last 5. But in every single one of those games, you can count on Lowe, he's played 37 or more minutes. So if you're paying for him at 9-1, you're paying for a very solid floor. And he's been as high as almost 10K earlier this month. So it's a slight discount from where he's been. Now, Ish Leggett is a more favorable play. If we're going to see any ownership here, I do believe it will be Leggett. He's priced at 8.1K. So we're going to get a 1K discount for a similar floor ceiling combo. Another really high usage guy playing all the minutes he can handle here for this Pitt team. Nice thing about Leggett, he adds a fair amount of stocks as well. Not that Lowe doesn't, but that is something that we see Leggett really pile up in a hurry. He's a slightly better three-point shooter as well. So take your pick between those two. I definitely think you want one of them. We did see Damian Dunn go to the bench as they inserted Guillermo Diaz-Graham back into the starting lineup. A lot of that had to do with the fact that Clemson has size in the front court, so they were matching size, and Guillermo really responded, played 34 minutes in that starting spot, knocked down 3 triples, 10 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists. He had 4 stocks, 3 of those being steals, and he had a massive 33.5 fantasy point game. He's priced at just 3.8K. If he were to remain in the starting lineup here against Syracuse, it'd be very difficult to not want to get exposure, but he has very big bust potential. 8 minutes, foul trouble, just ineffectiveness. There is a lot of negatives here for a player that, at 3.8, he can't hurt your lineup too bad, but there's definitely some downside here. But we did see a couple of weeks before this last game against Stanford, 33 minutes, put up 29.5 fantasy points. So it's a very easy minutes-based play to where if he starts and plays 28, 30-plus minutes, he's a no-brainer at 3.8. If he doesn't start, I don't see how we can play him. He's looking at 12-plus minutes in his last 3 non-starts. So we'll see how that goes. You have to trust that he's going to play the minutes if he starts. Damian Dunn is a very good spot here against the Syracuse defense that can't defend the three, can't do much of anything, honestly. So Damian Dunn could light them up from long range. He's been a little bit lackluster lately. His price is at 5-1, so it's not as if we're not getting a huge discount on him. But minutes have been steady. But you see from a starting spot of 32 minutes off the bench to 24, definitely a big difference there, and we're not getting this huge 4.2 value play that we were before. Definitely not a full ignore. He's going to be in the player pool, but I don't know that he ends up making the main lineup. And there's just a lot of mouths to feed here. You see his scoring has taken a hit here as well. Lowe and Leggett just do so much damage. It doesn't leave a lot of leftovers for the rest. You've got guys like Graham taking threes. You've got guys like Zach Austin taking threes. Like, this Pitt team is just a 3-point chucking machine. In fact, that last game against Clemson, Zach Austin took 10 threes. He only made 2 of them, but he is absolutely chucking there at 6'3". So you know he's going to be firing up Cam Coran, going to handle most of the business down low, going up against Eddie Lampkin. Be interesting to see who gets into foul trouble first before them. I would suspect Coran does struggle a bit staying on the court for this one, so be a little bit leery of him. And that will play into Guillermo Diaz-Graham playing a few more minutes. His brother Jorge Diaz-Graham was playing relatively strong minutes, about 15 to 18 off the bench, but those went away against Clemson. Can't trust him either. Keep your exposure here to Guillermo, Dunn, Leggett, and Lowe. Maybe a little bit of Austin splashed in. Coran doesn't project all that bad, as you can see on the screen. He's been pretty solid, but just really kind of predicting a fouls game here for him. On the Syracuse side, it's a mess regardless of if Freeman plays or not. He's not going to. We have seen more of the freshman Petar Mastrovic lately. He's played 20-plus minutes in 3 straight games. He looked pretty good against Louisville, not as good against Clemson. A lot of empty minutes for him. I'd like to see him hit the glass more. He's priced at 3.3, so if you're doing the multi-enter thing, he definitely makes some sense there. They're clearly going to continue to play him and allow him to develop. The starting 5 that Syracuse has been running isn't particularly great on paper, and it hasn't given them the best results either. You have Eddie Lampkin, you have J.J. Starling, both solid. You have Jair Davis, very solid as well. But Lucas Taylor and Elijah Moore, not giving them a lot. Moore still a freshman. He's got a lot to still learn and develop. Then off the bench, we're seeing Petar, Juan Carlos, Chris Bell, who's eternal, and Kyle Cuffey. And Cuffey, Bell, and Carlos just rotating minutes. Sometimes you'll see Carlos play 25. Sometimes you'll see Chris Bell spike to 22. Not really much here in terms of playability, viability. J.J. Starling is really the only option that I feel like would possibly make my main lineup, and it's not a great matchup. Pittsburgh forces turnovers. He's not going to get a ton of uncontested shots. I think he gets volume, but we know J.J. Starling can cause a lot of issues there, especially if those shots aren't falling. The price is intriguing at 6.8. I think he has a lot of GBP upside here just because of that volume. But I don't think we're really looking to Syracuse too much here. Pittsburgh should be respected, and they've been not a very fantasy-friendly defense much this season. All right, Georgetown versus Providence is the next game on the slate here. Total of 139.5. Providence as a 1.5-point favorite at Cooley Bowl here. You know the Providence Friar fans are going to be anxious here. It's going to take some time for that hurt to go away. It may not ever go away. So expect some heckling here and a lot of pep in the step for both teams for sure. Starting out with Georgetown, we saw Jaden Epps went from being kind of limited, not starting, to just absolutely detonating. He played 31 minutes against Villanova. Looks like he may have shaken off the sicknesses, the hamstring issue, the ankle issue, all these various ailments that Epps has had. It's been worrisome. I was a little bit gun shy about using him on that last slate. The industry wasn't. He was like 60% owned, and he had a really nice game there. Shot 5 of 11, 3 of 6 for downtown, 15 points, 2 rebounds, 4 assists, on his way to 26 fantasy points. He's priced at only 4.6. He's probably back into the starting lineup for this one, and if he's not, it looks to be that he's clear, good to go. Curtis Williams, Caleb Williams, both of their minutes went very low there in that last game, so look for Epps to either reclaim his starting spot or play the minutes of a starter. So 30-plus minutes for a 4.6K Jaden Epps. It's a no-brainer, obviously. You come over here and you look at where we would project him at 30 minutes, well over 5X. He's going to be super high owned in all formats. especially in higher dollar single entry stuff. Not a lot of upside to fading him there. Maybe if he doesn't start, you've got some alt builds, try to get away from it. But if he's starting, there's just no upside to fading. You do see Caleb Williams, who has been a really solid value for the past month and a half because of the injuries to Epps, the ailments to Mac, some of the others, but clearly he's going to be unusable for now. Played only 22 minutes, and that's coming right out of the pool and going right into Jaden Epps. That goes for Drew Fielder as well. He had a really nice game without Sorber. With Sorber, he's just not a factor. He's not going to get a lot of shots. So Epps as our obvious play. And then you have Sorber priced at 9.8. You have Micah Peavy priced at 8.8, playing every possible minute. And Malik Mack priced at 7.9. None of them are bad options. I think against the Friars, any one of those players could work. I think Sorber's a little bit of a risk just because there is size on that Providence front court and they're not afraid to get physical. But all of these guys, and maybe like a Georgetown mini stack for tournaments, could potentially work, especially since I think this game will be close and does have some very big overtime potential. But Jaden Epps, very, very obvious. On the Friars side, we still have Bryce Hopkins, probably not playing anytime soon. And we'll have to monitor the situation. Ryan Mila, who is the breakout star of the Big East, the freshman, had an illness back, was it a week or two ago? You'd like to think that's all done, over and done with, but the norovirus has just been ripping through the country, especially in locker rooms. And what happens when teams or players have this happen, obviously it's contagious. It gets around, and you see other guys get sick from it. So it's something that we have to be aware of. I'm projecting as if Mila is going to play, so I would expect that. A little less confident about Wesley Cardette, who did miss their last game as well, but that was not for a sickness. That was to do with a pre-existing leg injury that he had. So he's officially listed as questionable. I think that we'll see Mila, but we won't see Cardette. And with that, it does kind of mess up the minutes a little bit. Justin Fernandez got the start without Mila, played 26 minutes against Villanova, was absolutely unconscious from long range, 5 of 10. The best game of his young career, 17 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists. He's priced at $4K. If Mila's out again, I guess I don't suspect, or I would be very shocked if Fernandez replicated that production. That was pretty wild. That was a top 1% outcome for those that rostered him. If Mila's out, though, clearly the minutes and opportunities are going to be there for him. We'll see what happens with Cardette. So I'll reserve judgment on that one right now. But that's a big chase play that I feel like is got way more negatives than positives. So we'll see how that news actually shakes out. Oswin or Humwinsi, he's been fantastic at 5.4K. He is an absolute elite rim protector and a great rebounder. His size is going to be needed to check Thomas Sorber. Somebody's going to get into foul trouble between those two. There's also Christ Esendako, who did not play last game, but he played the game before. We'll see what kind of minutes he potentially gets in this matchup. But overall, it's just really checking to see if Mila is going to be out or Cardette. Bensley Joseph, who was in the doghouse a little bit there, coming off the bench, barely playing for a few games. He played 20 minutes against UConn, and it seemed like, man, this guy's he's not going to play much. Played all 40 minutes against Villanova. Huge shooting performance for Bensley Joseph. It shows you just how good he really is. This is a crowded Providence team on the perimeter, but he was magnificent. 20.7 rebounds, 3 assists on his way to 36. It's the third time in his past 4 games that he has eclipsed 29 or more fantasy points. He's cooking right now. I don't feel particularly comfortable paying 6.2 for him, but it's hard to deny what is happening and how he's been playing. But you see the game against Creighton, right in between the massive Seton Hall game and massive Villanova game. He shot 1 of 10. Absolutely terrible. Only played 22 minutes. Hot hand situation, perhaps. He shot 80% against Seton Hall. He shot 50% against Villanova. I don't want to be tied to a guy who's going to be, has to shoot well from the jump to get minutes. So it's a whole lot easier to play him without Mila and Cardette. So again, I'll reserve judgment there, but I think right now we're just going to lock in Jaden Epps, and we're going to move on to the next game. Hey, what is up, my man? T9X78. I know I can always count on you to show up. I had some serial complainers about about my face being on the screen too much and talking too much. I don't know how to give you the info without talking, so I'm going to continue to give you these projection visuals here instead of my pretty face, which if you want to see is still right over here for your enjoyment. All right, next game on the slate here, we have Mississippi State versus South Carolina. Total of 140. Mississippi State is a 7-point favorite. There is some news here. It's going to be a lot of news, as usual. South Carolina at home here. Ken Pom does have this a 4-point victory for Mississippi State. I still like Mississippi State a lot under Chris Jans. They have lost 3 of their last 4 in here in conference. A blowout loss to Auburn, not a puzzling loss, but on the road against Tennessee. Defensively, that was always going to be a tough one. They had an overtime win against Ole Miss and the close, high-scoring loss at home to Kentucky. So got to get back on track here because a loss to South Carolina is going to be disaster. They do have a home game against Alabama on Wednesday and the next Saturday against Missouri, 2 very good teams. In fact, you don't get too many easy ones in the SEC. Their schedule coming up, Bama, Missouri, Georgia, Florida, and Ole Miss. Murderers row over the next couple of weeks. They need to win this South Carolina game. They're 15-4. It's not time to panic just yet. It's a great overall record. They mauled during non-con play, but they don't want to get down to the bottom of the SEC standings. This is a team I still think has Sweet 16 potential, but they're going to have to show it to us against South Carolina. Now, South Carolina, they've got injury news, as I mentioned. Colin Murray-Boyles is questionable. Highly questionable is that. Now, a lot can change between now and the next 8 to 9 hours, but it does sound like there's a serious chance that he misses. And without him, they have very little chance of checking that Mississippi State front court and containing them on the glass. So depending on CMB's status will determine how much exposure I really want to this Mississippi State side, because without CMB, I'm definitely going to want some Keyshawn Murphy. I'm definitely going to want some Cam Matthews. They're just going to go crazy. The good news for them, Jamari Thomas, who has missed the last couple of games, is probable. So we can expect, one of their best guards to come back. That does put a wrinkle in some of these, decent guard plays that we've had. Mainly the youngster Morris Ukasuk, who is priced at 5'4" now. A little bit difficult to get to him here anyways. But without Thomas, I'd be more interested. He's still my favorite long-term guard on this roster. It's going to probably be a situation where Jacoby Wright, Zachary Davis, their minutes get condensed a little bit. We see Thomas take from that pool, and then Arden Conyers, the other younger player, quickly developing, who played 32 minutes against Oklahoma. We'll probably see his minutes start to dwindle down a little bit as well. Miles Stude is out for the long term, so don't have to worry about that. But depending on how this whole CMB situation pans out, we'll see a fairly deep guard rotation. It makes most of them pretty unappealing for the most part. Now, CMB is out. Nick Pringle is there at 6'2". He would be the primary front court player there. More opportunities for him, but he's a high fouler. We know that. I think Mississippi State guys would just go at him until he has to sit on the bench. So that's the news there on the South Carolina side. Now, in Mississippi State, everybody, for the most part, aside from Kanye Clary, is healthy, good to go, and available for this one. Kanye Clary has not played since late November. Pretty serious injury. He's not going to play in this game. I don't know if they're even going to get back this year. But imagine how good this Mississippi State team has been. And if they had a healthy Kanye Clary, who was just a monster for Penn State last year, right? How much better they would even be. They have so many weapons, so many options on this team. Now, due to the nature of how badly they lost that Tennessee game, we see a little bit of overreaction with the pricing by DraftKings. They've dumped the prices on several players. Here, let me pull up this game too, so you can look at the right thing. There you go. So the pricing on all of these guys are really appealing. Cam Matthews dumps from nearly 9K all the way down to 7-8, where he is a really strong option overall. Maybe a little gun shy to use him in a main lineup because he does bottom out. That is a possibility, especially with foul trouble. But when he's on and he's hitting his ceiling, he can absolutely blow the doors off of this price. Legit 50 plus fantasy point upside in this matchup as well without CMB. So that's play number one at 7-8, most expensive. I know that's not earth-shattering. The rest of the front court definitely has to be in consideration. The other starter there, Michael Nwoko, priced at 4-5. He played 21 minutes against Tennessee. You're not seeing a ton of upside from him, but a much better matchup, at least on paper, against South Carolina potentially. He doesn't get a lot of shot volume. He doesn't get plays called for him. His job is to protect the rim and to grab rebounds. And at 4-5, he can do enough of that, upwards of 8 to 10 rebounds perhaps, couple of block shots. He can pay this off without scoring at all, but anything he gives us above 2 real points is a bonus. So definitely a value play that we can consider. And then you have Keyshawn Murphy, who comes off the bench, but don't let that fool you. He has fantastic rates across the board. His fantasy point per minute number is fantastic as well. When there's foul issues, we see him play up over 30 minutes like he did in that overtime game against Ole Miss. 18 points and 11 rebounds. His price has fluctuated. It's been all over the place because of the massive games he's been able to produce. So not the cheapest at 6'8" for a guy that, yes, technically comes off the bench, but the opportunities are there for him. And then RJ Melendez, kind of a tweener at 6.6K. Hits threes with reckless abandon. He has these spike rebounding games. This would be a game where it would not surprise me to see him hit over 30 plus fantasy points. He is priced at the higher end from what we're used to, but he has hit 29 plus DK points in 3 of his last 5. Another one who's in consideration. At the guard pool, they're all cheap as well. Josh Hubbard, this is a much deeper, a much more talented Mississippi State team around him this year. In year 2, last year, he had to take so many shots and carry the load, and he's still taking a ton, mind you. 16 shot attempts against Tennessee, 13 against Ole Miss, 12 against Auburn, 16 against Kentucky. Like, that volume is still there for him. The peripherals, they're a little more spotty, but that shot volume is there. Now, he's not shooting particularly well, 31%, 15%, 16%. 31% and 33% over his last 5. So volume, no efficiency. But the brick games that he's been having, and for him a brick game, 20, has caused his price to really drop to a very, very low margin of 6.6K. That's a hard price to get away from. Looking at the actual projections, you can see they like him. 27.9 fantasy points at 4.2 value return. Tentatively given him about 32 minutes. Again, I know he's had his struggles, but they've had a murderer's row of a schedule, and it's going to only get tougher from here. But, to face Kentucky on their floor, and he had 15 real against them. At Auburn, game they were never really in. He shot 2 of 12. He just got to the foul line a ton. He just kept attacking. 17 real, one of the better games he's had in the last 5. Ole Miss, the overtime game, he played every single minute there, and before the overtime, 2 for 13 shooting. Again, just didn't make those shots. And then a tough Tennessee team where he played 34 minutes, 14 real. So he's scoring points. We'll take a look at some point props for him because I think that might be the way to go. But there's going to be a breakout performance from him. He did score 35 against Butler in that close game that they lost early in the season. Utah, he dropped 32. SMU, he had 25. So, there's some serious upside here for a player like Josh Hubbard. He just hasn't really shown it yet in the SEC this year, but we know it's looming. And sub 5% ownership, very, very intriguing to say the least. Claudell Harris, he's been dealing with an injury. They've been kind of vague about it, but it has messed with his minutes. He played just 18 against Ole Miss, 23 against Tennessee. Claudell was a very big play for us the end of December. Was coming through huge. And that was Riley Kugel in and out of the lineup and kind of a shorter rotation. Kugel now good to go, healthy and out of the doghouse. The ankle issue, having some flare-ups, but for the most part, we do expect him to be a full go. And he's played 30 and 25 minutes over the last 2 games, and that has caused Claudell Harris's minutes to drop. So not a big look on Claudell. We'll need to see his price fall down further. Right now he's at 5'9". I don't know that he's necessarily playable there. And Riley's sitting at 5'5". At the end of the day, they're probably just going to split. for the majority of the season. One that has the hot hand. We'll see more minutes one game to the next, but not a lot of edge there to using either because of the split. And they're priced about where they should be at this point. So looking at those projections, Hubbard, Murphy, Nwoko, Cam Matthews all project very solid. I do think Cam Matthews, if you can afford him in this one, he's where you want to go. Hubbard, if you're feeling a little bit, more risk, your tolerance for risk is a little bit higher. Maybe you go Hubbard instead for that discount at guard. But one of those two plays, I think, really has a big game here, and I do lean Cam Matthews. Looking at the way that this slate is and the obvious value that we have in Fs, we're going to have some room to play around here. So no issues there if we want to roster him. All right, next game on the slate here, a less exciting Michigan State versus Rutgers matchup. Total of 149.5. Michigan State 5.5 point favorites. The Spartans are just, I gotta say, man, Tom Izzo, this might be the year where we see the Spartans make a big run. It seems like every couple years, every few years, every quarter, decade, however you want to phrase it, they make a run. And this team is extraordinarily deep. They're extraordinarily talented, and they can compete with anyone. They're doing it in an era of basketball where you got to shoot a million threes. You gotta just push the pace. Like, they're not doing that. They're not making, they're making threes a little bit, but they're not forcing them. They're playing excellent defense. And it's kind of an old school flavor, mid-range games going. And this is a team that looks very dangerous and primed to win the Big Ten. Definitely a good litmus test against a very athletic Rutgers team, but they're very young. Michigan State has a ton of veterans. Yes, they have a youngster at point guard spot themselves in Jeremy Fears. But overall, this is a very experienced team that I think is going to give Rutgers a lot of problems. Looking at that, they're 5.5 point favorites. They're on the road. I do think that they cover that for what it's worth against a Rutgers team that's beaten up, banged up, and quite honestly, really not that good. They're good because of Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey, but when you take those two out of the equation, it's kind of a Washington Huskies roster. Can kind of talk about my own Huskies. There's just not a lot there that would scare you. And when one of them is out of the lineup, when Dylan Harper was out, it was just Ace Bailey taking 90% usage. So I think they'd have their struggles against the Spartans. It is going to be tough to use anybody on Michigan State. We've done it in the past, and we've had some success, especially with Jackson Keeler. But right now, what we're seeing is Jackson Keeler, Zemin Sapala, Cohen Carr, Carson Cooper, Xavier Booker, all of their big men playing this 15 to 20 minute range, and it's whether they're hot or not, having a good game or not, like, that's just where their minutes are going to be. So we're going to need to see some prices really tumble down, especially on Keeler, who I do think is the most talented, the most relevant for DFS purposes. The most exciting is Cohen Carr because he can dunk a lot. He's got some viciousness to him, but the rest of his game is still a little bit, in need of developing. We've seen some big outings from Carson Cooper, but he's there at 4K. Zapala has done nice. Xavier Booker has talent, no doubt, but there's just really nobody there that we can trust. I would say Xavier Booker at 3.7 is probably the most interesting. I think this Rutgers front court is going to struggle, and just the fact that the Spartans have so many bodies, but these are very low end plays. The guard rotation just as deep there. Fears is all the way up to 7K. Akins at 6'6", both of them as the top options. If Rutgers can keep this close, look for Jaden Akins to have a pretty big offensive outing. He has scored 27 plus fantasy points in 3 of his last 4. Involved in some high-scoring, closer games against the likes of Penn State, Illinois, and Northwestern, so they've been leaning on him more, definitely having some big games. Trey Holloman is interesting. I want to look at him in close games. His price is there at 5.7, but you saw in the game against Illinois, they eked it out 80 to 78. He was big, very instrumental there, 17 real points. Usually he's a facilitator, but he kind of pulled a DeJuan Harris there. They needed buckets. They needed somebody to step up and score. He was able to do it. Trey Holloman is, for my money, the best point guard on this roster, but there's difficulties getting him in there without injuries because of fears, because of Akins. You have Jace Richardson, the freshman, who is going through the freshman wall right now, but he's liable, to pop 30 fantasy points at any time. It's just a deep rotation at the end of the day. And when you look at the sheet here, you'll see my projected minutes kind of fall in line with that. Cooper 16, Carr 20, Keeler 20, Zavala 15, Booker 14. Like, I'm taking that on based off of, we have a minutes matrix that we mess around with, similar spreads, factoring, is there going to be foul trouble, all this other stuff. It's not a perfect science. Obviously, minutes are a very hard thing to predict, and we'll see certain players. Take, for example, Penn State versus Iowa tonight. I was very high on Yannick, Conan Niederhauser. Got into early. Well, he wasn't early foul trouble. He kind of had a porous first half. Picked up his second foul with 7 minutes left. Picked up his third foul immediately. Picked up his fourth foul immediately. And ended up playing 14 minutes. He had 26 fantasy points in those 14 minutes. Item projected at 29 minutes for almost 4.5x. He would have obviously hit that number. He would have been more than that number, 5x plus, had he played that 30 minutes that I projected him for. Fouls are a thing. Ineffectiveness are things. Benching, doghouse, all that stuff. It's very hard to project those minutes. So it's very important. That's why I want to start showing this sheet more, so you can kind of get an idea of where I stand. Hey, this is a very good play. I feel good about it, but he's got to play these minutes. If he doesn't play those minutes, it's just not going to work out. But it gives context to why it didn't work out. Instead of just like, oh, that was a bad play. Well, was it? Why was it a bad play? Oh, this guy missed a shot. He got into foul trouble. He picked up a technical. Luka Poplar tried to punch somebody, got thrown out. Was that really a bad play? Probably not. Do we have some bad variance? Do we have some poor luck there? Probably. In the same token, hey, was this a good play, or did we just luck our ass out and got, 2 games ago, Trey Orr for Iowa ended up playing like 27 minutes and broke the slate. Today he played 13. So we just have to have that context. Rutgers is a 2-man show. We know that, but there is value to be had here with Dylan Grant. Ace Bailey's extremely expensive at 10-4. I can't imagine playing him. I think even if he stays out of foul trouble and does log the 35 minutes that I've got him projected for there, he's going to be hard-pressed to pay off. We're probably talking about a 3x performance for him, 32 fantasy points. That's not going to be horrible by any means, but I think the Spartans will be ready. And I think they're going to frustrate him to a high degree. Would rather play Dylan Harper there at 8-4. He's definitely an affordable price, but that's a very tough spot to get involved with him. Again, those Spartans perimeter defenders are going to give him hell. No, nobody on this Spartans roster is a lottery pick. Dylan Harper is, but at the collegiate level of basketball, that doesn't mean shit. I think he does have some struggles as well. Emmanuel Ogboli is going to be out for the season, suffered a season-ending injury, so he is done. That means Lathan Somerville, the other freshman who has been starting and seeing an uptick in minutes, he should be granted even more minutes. And Dylan Grant, their other younger player who's been getting more and more minutes as a starter, he should get more opportunities as well. Dylan Grant is only priced at 4.3. Doesn't project as well here because the matchup isn't great. I do have the DVP filters on, but he's still relatively cheap. And if we can get 23, 24, 25 minutes out of him, should get close to that 4x number, especially if there's some garbage time there. Now, it's only a 5.5 spread, so it's not like it's going to be a blowout, or so Vegas thinks. I personally think it could turn into a blowout or get out of hand and be a double-digit game in which Rutgers just kind of plays their way out of it, especially early if they get popped in the mouth. Ken Palm does have it 79-73, so a little bit bigger of a spread there, but not by much. Overall, no real interest for these Rutgers guys for me. Even Somerville at 24 minutes, 4.7, he's definitely a viable value piece, but I think he's going to have a hard time with the experience of this Spartans team, and that's kind of just the running, thread of this game, that they're just going to have that problems. Now, they do have some veterans like Tyson Acuff who have done well, Jordan Durkak, Jeremiah Williams, guys like that. They may see more minutes, but really there's not a lot of excitement for this game whatsoever. All right. I appreciate it, man. I appreciate it. Something to look at in the back there. some opportunities for prop betting too. Getting early into props. I had some pretty good prop stuff. And I bet split my action. I went to DK today and instead of just putting normal bets that I would put on what I did, I put some on Unrivaled, the women's pro league 3-on-3, which is it's good. I like WNBA, I like women's sports. I'm not going to complain about that, but I haven't been, it's only been in the second week and I haven't been following it as much. I just read some injury news and thought, oh, well, Brianna Stewart's team is gonna win their first game, and wow, they sucked. And I should have just put it on what I've been paying attention to. I'm gonna bet more on Unrivaled, and I'm gonna watch that more. But it's just kind of funny how that worked out. But I'm getting way more into prop bets. I think now we're finally turning a corner in the bets or the books, and we're finding some softer numbers there and where they can make some mistakes. They've been pretty tight to this point, but I definitely feel good about where we stand right now, especially on the books straight up or underdogs. Prize picks, not as much. They've been a little tighter, but that's okay. All right, next game on the slate here, Iowa State versus Arizona State. Total of 145. The Cyclones are 9.5-point favorites, and this is a game I want a hell of a lot of exposure to. The Cyclones came through for us mostly in their last game. They are a team that very easy to predict where the projection or the production is going to come from. They are a team that I, at this point, trust a great deal. They're expensive, no doubt, but they are just a team that doesn't fail us very often. And they have a great matchup here against an ASU team that bleeds fantasy points to multiple positions. Prices up on all. Keshawn Gilbert 9.2, Curtis Jones 9K, and Josh Jefferson all the way up to 10.2K. But again, this is a fantastic matchup. You're going to want to play one of them. I know it's going to be hard to play two without making some sacrifices, but we have that EPS value. We have possibly, if we're getting cute in the NC State game, a little bit of value there. We have some cheaper guys on the Providence side, depending on how that shakes out. We have Dylan Grant if we just want to throw him out there for the salary savings to be able to fit. But I think Josh Jefferson is, once again, I thought he was a great play against UCF, and he smashed. I think he's a great play here against ASU. And we can look back to the ASU-UCF game where it just like blew up and multiple people put up huge scores. Just both defenses are just sprung a leak, giving up a huge amount of fantasy points. And this is just a great target here, especially against the ASU front court. Bashir Jihad, I don't think he's going to be able to handle the duo of Deshaun Jackson and Josh Jefferson. And Jefferson's just having a career output right now. 30 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists, 4 steals there against UCF in the game in which they scored 108 points. I do think Iowa State has a chance to put up 80-plus here once again. It's a very expensive price. Nobody's probably going to be brave enough to roster Jefferson, so you have built-in leverage there, but I think he's a very, very good option. There is the risk that he hits only 30, gives you that 3x number, but you see what his upside is there, hitting 50-plus. And again, this is a very favorable spot. Choosing between Gilbert and Jones, usually you want to use the cheapest of the two. Like last time, Keshawn Gilbert was priced at only 7.8. He delivered a near 50 against UCF as well, but that performance has jacked up his price to 9.2. Curtis Jones, 19 shot attempts last game, 16 before that, 17 in the game before that. Still absolutely chucking, and he's rebounding at an elite level. 8, 8, and 6 over those last 3 games. So don't be fooled by Gilbert as the more complete peripherals guy, because he had been early in the season, but Jones is starting to step up in that regard, and he's obviously one of the best, if not the best scorer on the team. Very easily see him battling BJ Freeman on the other side and trading bucket for bucket. So very much so involved with Curtis Jones. He's probably my preferred look out of the group. And then Keshawn Gilbert, again, high assist rate, facilitator. He can score, as he proved against UCF, scored 21. And a lot of that was on just drives. And then, contributed 3 steals, 6 rebounds of his own. So you really can't go wrong here. Multiple Iowa State guys. Yeah, it's on the road. Yeah, Iowa State, they had a puzzling loss against West Virginia on the road. So perhaps, and then they Texas Tech game on the road, they won 85-84, some late heroics there. It's hard to play on the road. It really is, but I'm not worried about Arizona State one bit. I think we see the Cyclones put up a huge number here, and I think it's a real mistake not to have that exposure. You do have Tamin Lipsy at 6'4". He did have 25, 9, 5, and 1 with 3 steals. He's not much of a scorer these days, locked in on defense, though, and he does enough to pay off these meager mid-6K range prices. But you know the downside is out there, too. So if you can find the salary to go to the top 3, you do it. But if you can't, I don't hate the idea of using Lipsy. You also have a very cheap Deshaun Jackson at 5'1". Early in the season, Jackson was putting up some pretty big games, very consistent. Jefferson was more up and down, but now it's turned into a situation where the other guys are hammering so hard. There's not a lot of shot attempts for Jackson, and he's kind of getting pushed off the glass too. Not necessarily getting pushed off the glass by his teammates. I shouldn't say it that way, but we're seeing Gilbert, we're seeing Curtis Jones, we're seeing these other positions grab rebounds at a high clip. And that's just overall cut into Jackson's production a lot. He's very cheap. He's very interesting at 5'1", especially in this spot. But the minutes are down, the opportunities are down, and he's just clearly the least productive starter in the group right now. But at some point, he's going to have a game, and this is a buy low spot, no doubt. Weather is wreaking havoc. I know you guys on the East Coast have it worse, but man, weather is wreaking havoc. As far as any of the bench pieces, this isn't quite a situation like Marquette, where the bench is, although Royce Parham was good today, where the bench isn't usable for DFS. It's not quite there yet, but it's pretty close. Your main pieces, Nate Heisey, Brandon Chatfield, and Demarion Watson at this point, with Milan Monklevich still out. Heisey did play 20 minutes against UCF and had a pretty complete game himself. 25 fantasy points, 9, 3, and 2 with 4 steals. Wondering if people will chase that a little bit at 4-1. That's pretty bad value overall, I think, just because I don't expect him to replicate that. Chatfield's had his struggles, can't really use him. And Demarion Watson's minutes went up last game, but that had more to do with the blowout, and he hit a bunch of free throws at the end of that game, which kind of jacked his final score up as well. So kind of tread carefully there. There's a lot of different ways and routes you can take with this Iowa State team, but at the end of the day, I really think you need to play one of those top pay-ups in Gilbert, Jefferson, or Jones. I'm going to look at ways to play 2 of them, but that might be a little bit easier said than done. On the ASU side, Jaden Quaintance, man, he is just solidifying the hell out of his draft stock, isn't he? Man, he can't shoot threes yet. If he could hit threes, there's no doubt in my mind he would be the #1 pick over Cooper Flagg, Dylan Harper, Ace Bailey, all these guys. Like, if you haven't seen ASU play, why not? Well, I guess I know why, because they're not very fun to watch. But Jaden Quaintance is a real pleasure to watch. The game against UCF was a really fun one. High-scoring affair. Defense was optional at times, but when they did, they were making highlight blocks, and that's one thing Quaintance does. He is just an absolute ridiculous shot blocker. The hops this kid has are unimaginable. He's rebounding at an unreal level right now, and he's scoring more. He's already getting himself to the foul line, but he's looking to attack. The only weak part of his game is he can't shoot threes. But, man, this kid has, like, uber upside. Scouts are absolutely, mouth-watering over this guy, salivating over this kid. Going to have his work cut out for him against Iowa State, but he's had his work cut out for him in many matchups. Cincinnati on the road, he had a huge game, 15, 14, and 5 blocks against them. Baylor, tough spot at home. They lost that one. 8 rebounds, a couple blocks. Like, he is just having these big games. On the road against Kansas, 11 rebounds. Like, he is just putting together signature performance after signature performance. The 8-9 price, it's pretty stiff. It's hard to get to, but man, he just continues to produce. Block rate, 15th highest in the country right now at 10.5%. Combined rebounding rate of 30%, and in conference play, those numbers have all gone up, believe it or not. They're also going to get Josen Sandin back, their other freshman on the wing. Doesn't sound like he's going to play a ton. There might be a minutes cap involved there, although they haven't come out and say that, but he's more limited than I think people realize. His presence helps. He'll get around 12 to 15 minutes at worst. He's only 3.8K, so there might be a temptation to use him. He is really good, but with the games. It's only been a handful. It's an ankle issue, though. I do have my worries there with him. But his presence helps the rest of the group, even if he's out there as a decoy. J-Howd at 7.2, Freeman at 7K, and then Austin Mason 6.3, Adam Miller 4.7. That rounds out the rest of the relevant rotation. BJ Freeman would be the most playable for me against this Iowa State team. Yes, he's 7K. It's a difficult defense to be playing against, but he's really taken on the alpha role in the offense, especially once they're in conference play now. You see his shot attempts 11 plus in 5 straight. And he's doing enough in every category, and he also gives us guard forward eligibility. He's actually a little bit cheaper than he has been lately. The UCF game was kind of his signature performance of the season. Freeman terrorized the horizon for years. He is a very good play, and I think we see him put up a pretty nice number here overall. I think it'll be hard for me to land on ASU guys in my main build, but there's some heavy upside here with guys like Freeman and Quaintnitz. And you can see that the projections on them are moderate. Freeman just a tick under 4x. Miller's really cheap at 4.7, but it's hard to trust him. He doesn't seemingly have much upside these days. And then you see Jaden Quaintnitz, pretty expensive there, right around 3.5x, but he kind of defies all logic with the way he plays. I tell you, if he could score with any consistency, there'd be no way that he didn't put up 60s like every single game. Kid's that ridiculous. All right, next game on the slate, Boston College versus North Carolina. This is one that we are going to want some exposure to. North Carolina, 18.5-point favorites, total of 166. That makes it officially the highest total on the slate, as is pretty typical for North Carolina games. Now, Kentucky game is right around 165, 165.5, so right up there as well. But those are games we definitely want exposure to. North Carolina, they got a huge performance out of Elliot Kadu. He played 39 minutes against Wake Forest. It wasn't even an overtime game. He just was balling out of control there. They did end up losing that game 67-66, so the skid continues here. 44.5 fantasy points for Kadu. 14 points, 13 assists, 2 steals, 5 rebounds. He has not had a game like that in a long time. I think last time was against Elon, not Elon Musk, mind you, at the beginning of the season. He's been a very hard player to trust. The shot volume hasn't necessarily been there, and when it is, he hasn't made a great number. He's always been a great passer and facilitator, and putting up those kind of assist numbers definitely has my attention. In the last 2 games, his price has skyrocketed back up to 7.4 from 5.4 because he scored 29 and 44 fantasy points. Great matchup against BC. 39 minutes is way more than he's played pretty much outside of November. So I don't know if I can sit here and believe he's going to play that kind of time. But at 32, 33 minutes, he's definitely a solid look. The assist opportunities are always going to be there. You've got a scorer and shooter like Ian Jackson. You've got RJ Davis. Those are going to be there. But I don't know that the shot attempts are. Seth Trimble, coming off the bench, he's liable to pop off at any time as well. We know that about Seth Trimble. So I would caution against chasing that Kadu performance. It was definitely an impressive outing. But that, kind of feels like more of the outlier as opposed to the norm, right? But definitely a solid look if you want to at least heat check that game. I don't hate it at all. I would rather go 400 more to RJ Davis. Davis still relatively cheap. This 8K and under price tag that we've seen out of him. I was all over him against Stanford. Crazy enough on that slate, he was like 7% owned, and I get why. He had some pretty bad outings prior to that. And he's not the same RJ Davis that we've been accustomed to. Without a proper big man, he's just been harassed and shooting terribly. We have seen the offense step up to another level in the last games. Granted, that was against Stanford and Wake Forest, against some lesser tier competition. But the nice thing is they're now facing BC. This is definitely a soft part of their schedule. Yes, they lost to Stanford on a last-second shot. Yes, they lost to Wake Forest late. But these are fantasy-friendly groups that they're going against. And Boston College is a team that RJ Davis should be able to dominate against. The only issue I see is if it turns into a blowout too fast, he will take his foot off the gas and it'll allow others to do some damage. And that's something that we did see in the Cal game. They got up on Cal early. He didn't have to do much. He really didn't play much in the second half to begin with. But even when he was on the floor, he wasn't looking for a shot either. So that would be the only concern. If they take BC and they just absolutely throttle them by halftime, Davis will brick at 7-8. Tend to look at him more in close games, but that price is hard to argue with. And then you have Ian Jackson at 7-1. He was a little bit cold against Stanford. That continued against Wake Forest. He's a youngster. He's a freshman. He's going to hit those walls. Let that price come down a little bit more. It's already dropped to 1K since last weekend. Let's let it fall a little bit more before we go there. Seth Trimble coming off the bench at 5'8". Pretty much lost his starting spot at this point to Ian Jackson and dealing with that upper body injury. I do think he gets close to 30 minutes in this one because if it turns into a blowout, he'll get a lot of second half run. So Trimble's actually a pretty sneaky option at 5'8", because he'll get to play probably more than those other guards due to the fact that he's not starting. Unless he takes over for Drake Powell, which is a possibility, I suppose. We've seen, with the various issues and injuries and ineffectiveness that they've had, Hubert Davis has gone to a more inexperienced starting lineup there with Ian Jackson and Drake Powell, but they've grown up on the job and they've grown up quickly, so it's worked, especially when you have RJ Davis and Elliot Kadu at the wheel. I don't see Trimble jumping in the starting lineup over Powell anytime soon because Powell's been playing some 4, and that's not something Trimble can do. But stranger things have happened, and Hubert Davis is trying to figure out a way to stay up the hot seat. A lot of chatter in the Discord and a lot of chatter on social media in general about is he going to lose his job this year if they don't make the tournament. I do not think Hubert Davis loses his job. North Carolina, they would need to lose out this year in embarrassing fashion for him to lose his job this year. I do think there will be a bit of an ultimatum placed on him privately if they don't make the tournament next year, that he's probably out the door. But I do think regardless of what happens, he's got at least one more season. So that's my take there on Hubert. But he needs to fight back and try to find a way to make the tournament. And they're trying to shake up the rotation slightly. We saw Van Allen Lubin. He's been playing around 20 to 24 minutes in each of the last 3 games. He's been effective. He was very strong at Notre Dame at times and Vanderbilt. Jalen Washington only played 11 minutes in their last game against Wake Forest. He had looked pretty good prior to that. Jalen Withers saw an increase in minutes. So we're seeing a little bit of a shakeup. So I don't usually look at the forwards for North Carolina much. Jalen Washington was an interesting play as a cheap value piece, but now it looks like Van Allen Lubin might be pipping him a little bit for playing time. So really just a decision on, do you want to heat check Elliot Kadu? Do you want to try to play RJ Davis in a probable blowout? If the answer is no on those two, I don't know that we can really get to a North Carolina guy in our main lineup. And that's worrisome for me because I do think it's a high-scoring game for the most part. It just may be very balanced overall for the Tar Heels. And you'll see, if we get the 34 minutes for Kadu, we get the 36 minutes for RJ Davis, we get these minute totals for them, they're all overvalued pretty easily. But what happens if it turns into a blowout and we see 31 minutes for RJ Davis? Things don't look quite as appealing. Now, this is a DVP spot. You probably already know. Here, let me finish this and I'll look in the chat. I see the chat's lighting up. We take front court players against North Carolina. This is one of those spots that I'll just continue to exploit time and time again. For years with the Syracuse 2-3 zone, we would just take who we thought would be the high post, rake and rake and rake over and over again. It's working against North Carolina. They don't have Armando Bacot. Because of that, we are absolutely just punishing them with opposing front court players. There are several we can look at here. Injury news with Elijah Strong. He is questionable for this one. It's norovirus illness that's ravaged him, so he did miss that last game. He's missed the last 2 games. I would think he'd be back, but I thought that he'd be back last game. So we'll see what happens there. Certainly not comfortable playing him coming off a serious illness like that. He is only priced at 5.7. There's major upside for him. But what we're really looking at here is Chad Benny. Priced at 6.9K. Give him about 30, 31 minutes. Stay out of foul trouble for Chad Benning, and he should have no problem absolutely nuking this North Carolina front court. Look back to the Wake Forest game that just transpired. We were all over Trevin Spillers. We knew he was going to have a pretty easy time, and he did. 12 points, 9 rebounds, 4 blocks. But Efton Reed, who's had a pretty rough go of it this year, he had 12 points, 6 rebounds, 2 blocks, 2 assists. One of the best games Efton Reed's played this year. And we can go back and look at all the struggling big men who have played North Carolina, and they've had their breakout games. Chad Benning hasn't been struggling, but he should have a really nice game against this North Carolina team. Highest usage rate on the team at 25.4%. Highest shot rate on the team at 25.7%. Block rate of 6.5%. His rebounding rate, it could be higher, certainly, but he gets it done, draws 5 fouls per 40. He is the play here against North Carolina. And he's priced just high enough at 6'9" that I think people will probably stay away from. He doesn't have the most appealing logs. That's a bonus. I love these spots when North Carolina's on the slate. A front court opposition that maybe doesn't have the best last 6 game logs. Priced a little bit higher than people are comfortable with, and we get a spot where Venning probably comes up at 5 to 6% owned and is going to have a chance to put up a 40 in this spot. Got to stay out of foul trouble, of course, but you can see there on the sheet at 31 minutes, almost 30 fantasy points, easy value. There's upside for more for sure. We'll see what happens with Elijah Strong. Even if Elijah Strong plays, I still prefer Venning find that salary. Now you see here there is a value that's popping here depending on what the status of Strong is. They did play Fred Payne a lot more last game. You see he's projecting over here at almost 5x. Have him at 20 minutes. That's a volatile spot though, because I can't sit here and tell you with any definity that he's going to play those minutes again. He played 29 minutes in their last game against Virginia. Now it was a blowout. They got absolutely destroyed. He had been playing 14 to 16 minutes before that in a blowout loss to Georgia Tech. He played 20. This shapes up as another probable blowout. We get 20 plus minutes for Fred Payne at 3.5, and if they're missing Elijah Strong, then there is that possibility for Payne to play a lot, take a bunch of shots, and really kind of pay off this 3.5 price tag. That was a best case scenario against Virginia. He hit a bunch of threes. He had 3 steals, like top 1% outcome there for Fred Payne. So it is kind of, jacking up his projection a little bit. At 16 to 17 minutes, still pretty decent value here against North Carolina. Everything, kind of shows out for him to make value there potentially if that PT is there. 22.6% shot rate. He's making 42% of his threes on volume of 43 attempts. Does have a steal rate of nearly 3%. I mean, he's got solid rates across the board. He's only a sophomore. The guards in front of him, guys like Josh Beadle, had their moments. Deion Brown, inconsistent. Roger McFarland, not really very good at all, only shooting 22% from long range. And we saw McFarland kind of suffer there. And as soon as the game got out of hand, he got yanked, especially in the second half. 3 fantasy points in 20 minutes. Okay. So the opportunity is there for him, and that's why he projects so well. So I wanted to point that out because I'm sure that was attracting to some eyes. And then Donald Hand, the best scorer on the team at 6'7". Probably not getting to him too much. I think he'll be harassed. I think a lot of turnovers are coming his way, and that has been not a problem for him. He's done well not turning it over as much, but I do worry about him getting clean shots. The Virginia defense contained him. He only took 2 shots in that one. Kind of seemed like they just broke his spirit. He played only 23 minutes. Now, I didn't watch that game. I had to go in and see if there was some kind of injuries because that's so drastically different from the amount of minutes he normally plays, 35, 36, 37. But it was just a situation in which the game was over and they just didn't want to play him anymore. And it seemed like he didn't want to play either because going back and looking at that on streams, he was hanging his head. So Venning for DVP spot, and then, Fred Payne potentially at 3.5. Not a lock button value. I am curious to see what his ownership may be because of the huge performance that he just had, but we'll have to see. All right, let's get over here and see what we got. John says, what sports do you all offer? So we have, if you go, let me see. Let me share another one here. Bear with me. Bear with me. Self-produced. I want you to know I'm self-produced. All right, let me pull up the pricing page so you can see what this is all about. All right, share this tab instead. Okay, so you can see here we have a couple of different options. FTN Plus, which is all sports. You have annual and monthly options on that. We do have I'll have to double check. We had a 15% discount going on. I think that's still valid. I'll double check there if you want to DM me after if you're interested. So you see what that offers or what that includes. Literally all sports. We obviously have a really advanced NFL offering. MLB, we're very deep in that. NBA, all NHL, all of the pro sports that you'd come to expect, and then also niche stuff as well. I handle the college football, college basketball stuff. We have projections for college basketball, very in-depth. You're looking at them on the screen right now, or you were earlier. Articles for most main slates. Very advanced Discord. We post starters, news, discussions, lineups, all of that stuff. And then, we have the betting side. We have the season-long dynasty. That side, very lucrative. We have some really brilliant minds who cover the season-long and dynasty for MLB and NFL. MLB is crazy. Some of that season-long stuff there and how much money those guys make is absolutely ridiculous. So we have all kinds of offerings there. DFS Plus, which is not including the betting stuff. The FTN Plus All Sports is going to give you everything, combination, season-long content, DFS, all of that. Then there's the bets package, which you see there on the middle. That's basically what it sounds like. You're going to get all the betting content, the access to the models. We have basically a model for just about every single sport, betting trackers for all. So we track all of our bets. Any experts that are writing articles or posting picks in the Discord, it's not just like, hey, I picked this and then there's no way to track it, or we're only posting our wins or something. That doesn't happen. All of our picks are logged into a tracker, holds us all accountable. You can see, hey, before you tail a pick, this person's up, this person's down, if you want to tail them or not. So all transparency, full transparency. And then you see the best value, which is the VIP Plus. That gives you access to not only everything DFS related, but that gives you the betting site as well. And then the Dynasty season-long high-stakes stuff there. So VIP all access. You get everything that we have to offer. We have projections for every single sport, pretty much. Optimizers for all pro sports. The only thing I don't have for my college content is an optimizer. Something I definitely want to have. I'm not not advanced enough to know how to make my own, but I'm definitely have that in the works and have a buddy who is, and certainly going to try and have that by next season. It's very difficult. You'd think it'd be easy. It's not, but we have the projections and they're pretty solid. I'm pretty proud of the way that those have turned out and the content that we provide. Had people follow us for many years now. But if pro sports is your thing, there's very few places out there that I would say are better. And that's not just because I work at FTN. If I didn't work at FTN, I'd be saying the same thing. So that's the pricing page, ftnfantasy.com/pricing. That's how you can see all that. Tangos, are the DK and FD slates marked differently? Thanks for the info. I'm a college basketball noob. Hey, yeah, so they are, if you're asking if they're like the offerings are different, like rarely do this both sites, especially on Saturdays, give us the same like slates, unfortunately. So a lot of times the FanDuel slate will be smaller in that they don't offer mid majors and low majors like DK does. Or a lot of times it'll be a bigger slate and they'll include afternoon games, and that those games were specified by DK onto another slate, which were afternoon. So the games overlap, but sometimes the afternoon slate games from DK are on the main slate of FanDuel. I mostly cover DraftKings, although for football and stuff, we have a lot of FanDuel players for that as well. I do cover both slates. So if you're, more apt to play on one than the other, the show I use to cover DraftKings more because the feedback I've gotten over the years, the majority of our community does play DraftKings, but I do a lot of FanDuel content and one-on-one stuff and DMs with people who have FanDuel questions or want help with lineup construction. We obviously don't make people's lineups. We don't give out lineups, but we do help a lot with construction, cores, that kind of thing. So if you have more questions about FanDuel or DK, I will say FanDuel pricing is extremely soft and easier to cash on right now. I've noticed that is one thing I have noticed, but their contests are awful. Not that DraftKings are much better, but that's the thing going on right now with FanDuel. John, I just give you that. What's up, my man Tubby? Stopping by. Great weekend ahead. Hell yeah. The weeks are just going by so fast. God, the older I get, the less I care about holidays, birthdays, all of that. Like, remember as a kid, you'd be like, man, my birthday's coming up, but it feels like it's only 2 weeks away, but it feels like a year. And you know, it's just like now I don't care. And it's just like now I want time to slow down. And yeah, we're pretty much almost to the end of January, which telling the community is kind of historically, this is part of the transparency that I provide. I think people appreciate. We're not just like, yeah, we win all the time, because obviously we don't. But we're pretty competitive. But I will say January has historically been one of the harder months for me. And there is a bit of this past week, a bit of a cold streak. Fouls. We got hit with fouls with Yannick today. Injury to Tyler Billadu, like just weird stuff like that, right? That's just part of it. If you play every single slate every single day, you're going to go through these ups and downs. So yeah, this is a big weekend. This is a good one. It was only like 2 weeks away or removed from a pretty big takedown from myself, and now I'm in this like weird like cold streak of 3 or 4 slates. But you know, been doing it long enough. And I know it's going to turn. Positive variance coming our way, and I feel pretty good about these slates. There's some really good matchups here. But January tends to be a tougher month just because that transition from non-conference to conference and figuring out who's a non-con hero and who's not. And then we hit into February, and then of course March is where it happens. That's where we pay for the appliances in March with our big wins, buying the wife washer and dryer last time. And yeah, the seasons fly by. I mean, before you know it's gonna be Selection Sunday, and it's like one of the sad, bittersweet almost every time, right? Exciting thing though is in Seattle, they're hosting some first round games this year. I think I mentioned this on a slate or a stream a couple weeks ago, but looking at going to some first round games with my older son. Expensive as shit, but you know, 2 or 3, 4 game window there would be fun to go all day. So I may be doing some content from the tournament this year. We'll see. Hopefully that works out. All right, let me get back on track here. Appreciate you guys interacting. Let's share this one. All right. So let's move on to Texas A&M versus Texas. Recap there. North Carolina, target big men against them. Chad Venning is going to be our look, and I'm pretty sure he'll be low owned. Feeling some Chad Venning. Texas A&M versus Texas, total of 141.5. Texas, a 1-point favorite. Man, what's up, Wade Taylor? What is up with Wade Taylor? He's broken, I guess. You know, dealing with injuries, but he has just not looked himself even at the beginning of the season. And this Texas A&M team was so fun for DFS last year with Boots Radford, and obviously Wade and Manio was really kind of stepping up at the last month of the season. You could stack that team and feel pretty damn good about it for what it's worth. This year, I feel less excited about Texas A&M, especially their front court, which is just a revolving door. Zurich Phelps has been a pretty reliable option, expensive right now. And then you have Wade Taylor, who's cheap, but man, he's just really not looked good. And the 1-point win over Ole Miss, which was a great win for them, he was just totally ineffective. The shot attempts are there. He shot 2 of 12. 3 of 13 against LSU, 4 of 12 against Texas the last time they played, which was a home game. He is just uber struggling. But the price of 7.2 is right, and you're getting a very low-owned Wade Taylor at a price where, man, he could really break it. Minutes are going to be crucial here, and you see where we have him currently at 30 minutes. He's just under 4x. And I'm not even confident that he'll get that against this Texas team, who is banged up, but definitely capable of mucking this one up. And I foresee this one being another one of those low 60s types games, and it just really feels kind of bad to target. So if I'm not going to Wade Taylor, more of a GPP look, priced at 7.2, but nobody really else on this team that I'm that interested in. Pharrell Payne to me is the most talented front court player, but his minutes are he's in a logjam with Solo Washington, Anderson Garcia, Henry Coleman. All of these guys. Zurich Phelps' price is coming down at 8.2, but still needs to come down a little bit more now that Taylor's back. Not a lot to like here, and going into a hostile environment against Texas where, yeah, it's a 1-point spread, but I think Texas could actually take care of business here and win by 3 or more. On the Texas side, no Kendall Weaver still. We know that. Arthur Kaluma was questionable at the beginning of the week. He's since been moved to probable, so we will see Arthur Kaluma. He's going to be a major problem. I think what happens with the Aggies front court is they just get into a bunch of foul trouble. This is one of those games where I think Kaluma could have a really big outing. You're definitely paying up for him to a degree, and I think his ownership goes a little bit lower than it probably should. Now, Texas A&M in the last game at Reed Arena did beat this Texas team 80-60. So you might be saying, why do you think that they're going to win? Well, different Texas team at this point. They had a pretty rough shooting night. They had foul trouble in the first half. Caden Shedrick was awful offensively, and they didn't get a lot out of Kaluma either, who has been a really big producer this season. I feel like people haven't noticed how good Arthur Kaluma's been. It's a down game for him. I do think Texas takes care of business here. Trey Johnson also really struggled in that one. And for that matter, I think Trey Johnson could have a pretty big game here too. So definitely interested in some of the Texas guys. Arthur Kaluma to me could be a Q winning play. Priced at 8K. It's enough to keep people away. But I'm definitely interested in him. 2 straight double-doubles. The Missouri win was fantastic. Missouri had been on a pretty nice run there prior, held them to 53 points, 14 points, 12 rebounds for Kaluma there. And this defense of Texas has really started to step up. Trey Johnson is a very reasonable 6.9K, high usage, high shot rate guy. Failed him against Missouri, but 36 minutes, 15 attempts, 8 from long range, only hit 20 fantasy points. He's been below 30 in 3 straight, and that has allowed his price to dip. 6.9, definitely a great buy low spot for the future lottery pick. And then you have options who are relatively cheap. Caden Shedrick, Tremont Mark. Mark is one of those plays where I always feel like, man, I just want to plug him in at 5.3. It's such a reasonable price for somebody of his talent, but I don't know if it's a system fit. I don't know if it's, what the deal is here. I don't think he's unhealthy anymore. I think he's good to go there and should have shaken off the rust at this point, but it's just for whatever reason not working out for him. And I thought it would. Once Kendall Weaver went down, I thought that he would see 30 minutes a game. He has been playing upper 20s, but he's just not been getting it done. And even the game there against Missouri, he was out there defensively, did okay, but he just didn't contribute in the box score whatsoever. We did see additional minutes for Julian Larry, who played 25 minutes there. It's 3 of his last 4 games over 22 minutes at 4.1. He's definitely a viable value. More so one of those plays, what can he do for us in flexing out the rest of our lineup, and less about his actual score. Yeah, we'd love to see him hit 4x at this price, and he can. But if he hits like 10 or 12, it's not the end of the world, especially if the players that we get for getting him into our lineup, Curtis Jones, Josh Jefferson, some of those options we mentioned, go off, then we're okay with Larry getting 10 points. But he does have upside for more. And then Jason Kent down there at 3.6. If Kaluma has a setback, Jason Kent becomes very interesting, but if he doesn't, not really too interesting there. All right, moving on to the next game here. We have Kentucky versus Vanderbilt. Let me pull this up real quick. Tango, thanks for the info. Played my first single entry today on FanDuel. Didn't cash. Didn't have Braden Smith. No idea what I'm doing. That's okay. It's a good time to get into it right now so that when March hits, there's a lot of newer players who want to play because of the tournament, and you'll be one step ahead of the rest of them. So at DubDeuces85 on Twitter, or you can go on Discord and find me on there too. But I'm happy to assist you and talk you through a few things as well if you're serious and want to play. And keep checking out the show. Do give free content throughout as well. But no worries, man. Yeah, Braden Smith, I'm sure he was highly owned on FanDuel. It's funny how the pricing goes too, because you'll see a guy, FanDuel is a weird construction. For years, you could just take a 0, like a min price 0, and still win tournaments on FanDuel. It's not so much that way anymore, but you can get away with tanking some other spots. On FanDuel, you almost always have to pay up in order to do anything. On DraftKings, it's less necessary, but figuring out that construction on FanDuel, once you do, I don't say it's easy or anything, but it definitely becomes a favorable site to play on. Find myself cashing there more these days. DK's just gotten super competitive, but that's pretty typical in January. So, and January is almost behind us, so that's a nice thing. All right, Kentucky versus Vanderbilt. Total here of 160. Looks like it's 166 now. I had it at 165. So just as high as the North Carolina game. Kentucky 2-point favorites. We had that Vanderbilt-Alabama game on the slate here recently. Vandy is a team that they're pretty interesting. They're 15-4. They gave up 100 points to Alabama, but they scored 87. In that game, our man Jason Edwards, who's super chalky, had a huge performance, 21-4. Hoggard did not play so well. Jalen Carey was awful, and Devin McLaughlin had a pretty solid double-double. But Edwards, definitely the guy we want to look at here once again. He's still really cheap overall. We had cored Edwards. Not sure I'm going to be coring him in this one, but priced at 6.3. He's up a few hundred, but still very playable. High shot rate, high usage rate. You see against Alabama, high-paced, high-scoring team. He took 20 shots. I expect him to do similar here against Kentucky. And the nice thing is they're on their court, not on Kentucky's. So has that opportunity there to not kind of get lost in the sauce. Love Jason Edwards here once again. Best play overall on Vanderbilt. Hoggard there at 6'5". He looked awful. And he ended up hitting 22, but he looked real bad. Couldn't make his shots, wasn't aggressive, just thought he was going to be better there against Bama. Want his price to come down a little bit more before we really start looking his direction once again. And same to be said about Devin McLaughlin, who did have a nice performance. One DVP that has started to develop and more noticeable is bigs / front court players, high-end rebounders against Bama. I thought Jalen Carey might have a nice game against them, but he ended up getting foul trouble and not. And Devin McLaughlin pulled down 14 rebounds. So whenever Bama's on the slate, that'll be an identifiable DVP that we have there. Don't like McLaughlin as much against Kentucky. They have a much better front court, more physical, but they do have some injury designations, which we'll talk about here in a second. In the starting lineup has been Chris Mannion, who's priced at $5K. A reasonable value here against Kentucky. Will split minutes with MJ Collins off the bench. Grant Huffman starting to get healthy, playing more. So it's a low-end value, but definitely somewhat interesting. And then lastly, Tyler Nickel, guard forward eligibility. He put up a 33 against Bama. He has that ability. They need to lean on him more. He's a solid number 2 or number 3 option. Definitely don't think I want to pay $6K for him as the third option, but he is a very good all-team play in this matchup. All right, now on the Kentucky side, Andrew Carr, he's had the questionable tag for the last 3 games, and he's played anyways, but one thing we've noticed is his minutes. He's playing through the injuries, but the minutes are kind of dwindling. The Bama game, which he last played, was a little bit too fast for him, I noticed. So he didn't play much here. I don't know that that'll be the same case against Vanderbilt. He also had some foul trouble there. But I tentatively have him kind of penciled in around 21, 22 minutes. And maybe that's a little bit on the low side, but he's clearly not himself. That's enabled Brandon Garrison to see some more time, who I usually really like, but at 4'9", not as interested there. He had the big game against Bama. When you know it, front court players against Bama, he had 11, 6, and 5. Best game of his career. That's got him priced up. If Carr were to be out straight up, Garrison would become a pretty fair value play, probably a top-end value for me, but with Carr still around, I'm not going to be there with Garrison. But I do really like him. Amari Williams, an excellent play at 7'3". I do think he has a nice game against Vanderbilt. He had 11 rebounds and 13 points against Bama. Again, front court players versus Bama. Remember that for next time. He's had 3 straight double-digit games, or double-digit rebounding games. That's his thing. He's got elite rim protection, elite rebounding numbers. Still a fair price. It has come up at 7'3", but he's very playable there, especially with Carr banged up. The crazy thing about Amari, he has incredible rates. His fantasy point per minute number is very high. You'll see he only needs about 22, 23 minutes to still pay off this price typically. And the games and the off chance that he does play up to 29 or 30 like he did against Mississippi State, you see he puts up nearly 40. So in a game here, Vanderbilt can keep it close and cars banged up, and Amari plays 30 minutes, he has legitimate slate breaking upside. You'll see. Let me put up the right teams here. So needless to say, I want Kentucky exposure. They are a team. Anytime Vanderbilt's on the slate, I think we want to target for and against, and that's certainly the case with Kentucky at this stage of the season as well. You see, I have Amari at 24 minutes, puts him right around 30, 31 fantasy points. For example, there, he probably won't play 30, but if he did, slate breaker, absolute slate breaker. So probably my favorite Kentucky play overall would be Amari Williams, but there is foul risk, something to be aware of. We really avoided foul trouble for the first month of the season, like uncannily. It wasn't something that I brought up a lot because I didn't want to jinx it. Yeah, I'm one of those guys who believes in jinxes. And the last like 3 weeks of the season, we've just been getting absolutely pounded by foul trouble. So that is a little bit of a concern on the road for me. Not that much more with Ortega, Awe, or Lamont Butler. Certainly have a lot of interest in Ortega. Aiden Holloway had a really big game for Bama as a scorer. Mark Sears also had a big game. So I expect Ortega playing 30-plus minutes to be a near optimal play in this spot. And Lamont Butler for 7.6K also playing 30-plus minutes, coming off a game in which he scored 40 against Alabama, 17, 4, and 8. Will have major 30-plus fantasy point upside. I could see a Kentucky mini stack taking it down here, the seat, the jam, whatever you want to call it these days, and being on the optimal. Not as high on Jackson Robinson, Kobe Brea, options like that, but Awe, Butler, and Amari Williams, all solid looks. Don't mind the mini stack there if you can get it to it, along with Iowa State. That's because I forgot it. That's my fault about the game not changing to it. So I joke around that self-produced. I have to change it myself. And this is the graphics and the projection sheet isn't something I normally share on the free show. But I've just started doing that this week. So normally I just kind of do my thing and rattle off numbers and all that. So I'm old habit. So that was just me forgetting to change it. So sorry about that. Let me be preemptive and change it to Colorado, Arizona now. It'd be much easier if I had like a producer friend or something that could just do this part for me so I could just talk. But alas, we don't have that. All right, Arizona versus Colorado, total of 150.5. Arizona big favorites, 15.5. This Colorado team was competitive, more competitive than I thought they'd be, but in conference play, they've started to fall apart a little bit. They've got injuries galore, not healthy, super deep, like not a fun team for DFS purposes. Their best overall option has been Julian Hammond. Arizona was a team that we could target against. They were fantasy friendly for the first half of the season, or maybe first like quarter, but they've since in conference play become a very good defense, very, very borderline elite at times, and they're shutting guys down. So I don't have a lot of interest in the Colorado side here. Bangot Dak had some really huge games there against Cincinnati and Oklahoma State. Came back down to earth against BYU and played just 15 minutes. Definitely concerned about the Colorado front court rotation. Elijah Malone is back as well. He played 15 minutes off the bench. Typically, he's been a starter this year, but he missed a couple of games there. His presence is going to make it to where they have too many guys in the front court. Jakimovsky, Trevor Baskin, Diop, Malone, Carrington. Like, as these guys get healthy and as they start inserting them back into the lineup, we could see a rotation as deep as 10 or 11 guys, which is very Leonard Hamilton-esque at Florida State. So definitely not a lot of Colorado exposure here for me. And you can look at the Colorado options, none of them projecting particularly well. Julian Hammond as the best there at 3.7, priced at 65. It's definitely a good price for him because he is going to shoulder most of the scoring load. But he's just a secondary option. Much rather be on the Arizona guys who are much more affordable and in a better spot against this Colorado team. So starting with the guard rotation, Caleb Love, Jaden Bradley, and KJ Lewis. Caleb Love sitting there at 8-3, a very good price for Love. At this point, though, well, if you've been grinding with us, if you're new, I'll explain. Caleb Love is a very volatile player, has been for years. You're liable to get 15 fantasy points from him or 55. Huge range of outcomes. And you see there the game against Oklahoma State, they won 92-78. Caleb Love was on point, knocking down 4 of 9 from long range. He had 5 rebounds, 3 steals. He put up 45. The game cycle back to the West Virginia game. It was a blowout win, but he shot only 3 of 10 and he put up 16. They got their doors blown off against Texas Tech. He had 24. Like there's a lot of different outcomes there for Caleb Love. The 8-3 price is affordable for him. I mean, shit, he's been 10K this month alone. But at this point, he's just such an untrustworthy option, and that's nothing new. If you're running multiple lineups, you certainly want to have him in this spot against Colorado. It wouldn't surprise me if he detonated against them, but definitely not a main team look. Would much rather prefer KJ Lewis, even though he comes off the bench. He plays starter minutes. He's had a couple of down games here against a tough Texas Tech team and Oklahoma State. Now they're coming back home where he's been a pretty decent, much better at home. Splits in college basketball, I think, are a little bit of an underrated thing to talk about, but he's been much more comfortable there. Playing 29 to 30 minutes off the bench. I think he does have a nice game here. And then Jaden Bradley at 6'8". He's played really well, which has been the reason for the price increase to nearly 7K. 37, 39, and 38 minutes played over his last 3, and that has been a blowout and close game. So Bradley has the most secured minutes on the team. The forward rotation, without Mo Krivas, we basically are down to Carter Bryant, Toba Waka, and Henry Visar. Trey Townsend playing a little bit of 3, 4, and 5 for this team. Visar has been an absolute stud off the bench, although he was pretty porous against Texas Tech, but we'll give him a pass there. And he only played 12 minutes against Oklahoma State because of the 4 fouls, but you see he put up 20 fantasy points in just 12 minutes. Visar only needs 20 to pay off this 5.6K price tag. Elite rebounding rates, elite block rates, and he does have a mid-range game. He can score a little bit, and he can also hit threes. So as soon as Krivas went down, Visar absorbed those minutes. He's a little bit spendy at 5'6", considering, again, he's off the bench. They're just refusing to not start Trey Townsend, Toba Waka, but Visar is plenty viable here, especially against the Colorado front court that I think he can dominate. Toba Waka is very cheap at 5'1". He was like one of the one guys that did have a big game against Texas Tech, 14 rebounds. A bit of an outlier. We did see him with Tennessee. He could have that kind of production, but there's a bit of cannibalization happening here in this Arizona front court. You see his minutes are pretty well stuck between 17 to 20, so a little bit harder to get to him. He's a much more appealing option when he's priced at 4K like he was against Texas Tech, but he's still viable at 5.1 to a degree, more so maybe on a GPP lineup where we know there's upside, but probably not so much in single entry. And then the freshman Carter Bryant at 4'7", who did benefit from some blowout games here recently. He's been getting better and better. Probably more of an option next year, but they're starting to lean on him more, so it's good to see that development. Trey Townsend was an absolute stud in the Horizon last year and the tournament. Had a nice game, 19-2 against Oklahoma State. Good to see, but it's clearly a system fit issue here for Trey Townsend. Priced at 4.8, still not that playable. Crazy to think about because we would have played him last year at 9K and 10K with regularity without even batting an eye. All right, let's move on to the last game here, Georgia and Florida. Let me change this before I forget. All right. Florida 10.5-point favorites, total of 148.5. Florida does have some injury designations that we want to talk about. Will Richard did come into the last game as questionable. He will come into this game as questionable, but I do not expect him to miss. He played 36 minutes against South Carolina. They made it seem like he was going to miss a ton of time, and then he just played his normal minutes. So I don't expect Will Richard to be out of this game. Kind of not necessarily ignore his injury designation, but would be surprised if he didn't. Sam Alexis is doubtful. Not a huge contributor. He was playing about 15 to 20 minutes in the non-con. Now he's playing more like 9 to 10, but being that he's probably out, that is 9 to 10 minutes to go into the pool of others. Guys who should benefit from that, Thomas Hauff, who is priced at $5K, played 24 minutes against South Carolina. I think we see him in the mid-20s here against Georgia as well. He was another guy who was very productive in the non-con, hasn't been as much in the SEC, but I do have some interest in him against this Georgia team. Ruben Cheniello, priced at 5.7, would expect him to see his minutes spike up over 20 as well as he absorbs some of those Alexis minutes. He's shown a veracity on the defensive end. And then maybe we see some additional minutes for a guy like Isaiah Brown down there at 3.2. That would be a dart throw at best. And Denzel Aberreen, who's priced at 4K, playing about 15 to 20 minutes. Perhaps he soaks up a little bit of those minutes as well. The top 3 options on this team, all very expensive at this point: Walter Clayton, Elijah Martin, and Alex Condon. Probably not going to find that I'm on them in main this time. Clayton can break it at any time. Martin has been uber steady, and Alex Condon has really just flourished as the primary big on this team, which is something that we called out last year. It's like, this kid's upside is ridiculous. He's going to be very good, and he has been. That game against Texas, 11 points, 4 steals, 12 rebounds, that was a monster performance. But more often than not, he's going to be churning out those 25 to 30s, and I just don't know that we can pay this 8.6 for him. And I don't expect him to be very highly owned either. I don't expect any of the Florida pay-ups to be super chalky. So if you're a multi-enterer, you have that knowledge, you can get some leverage there, but I think they're more secondary looks on this one. On the Georgia side, Asa Newell, he's going to have his work cut out for him against his Florida front court, but he did against Auburn, which he was very good against. Granted, no Janai Broom, but 16 and 10 still against a physical Dylan Cardwell and company. Arkansas, they have uber athletic players in the front court. He had a pretty solid outing there, 30 fantasy points as well. At Tennessee, 13 and 5, against Oklahoma, 15 and 5, and against Kentucky, 17 and 7. So he's been uber steady, one and done prospect. Definitely in play at 7.6, a borderline main team play. Definitely the top overall option for Georgia. I also like for a alt build Santos Surreal. It's much more interesting at 3.8 than 4.4, but he's still in play. His size is going to be needed here against Florida. I wouldn't be surprised to see him play more like 20, 22 minutes if he can avoid foul trouble. This is another one of those tailor-made players, rebounds extremely well, elite shot blocker, should see minutes on that merit alone. As far as their guards go, Silas Demery, Tyron Lawrence, Blue Kane, those are your primary looks that are going to rotate in and out with Dakota LaFew and Montgomery. All of those guys have had their moments this year. None of them particularly interesting against Florida. Demery, high turnover rate. Lawrence has a tendency to disappoint or disappear. Blue Kane fouls a lot. And Montgomery is a very streaky scorer. So not a lot of 100% definitive feeling great about anyone on Georgia besides Asa Newell. And I think he's more of a secondary play, but I wouldn't mind going to him in main as a kind of late night hammer, if you will. All right, let's your son's going into producing. You know, I tried to talk to my my older son's going to be an electrician, which is great. But I have a younger brother who's all of 20. Is he 21 now? He's like 20, 21. And he's really into computer stuff. And I tried to rope him into it, but he didn't want to. So, yeah, I will definitely do that. We have producers at FTN, but they're obviously on the pro sports stuff. And I go on so late. There's nobody that's trying to produce with me. But yeah, be a good opportunity for everyone. I've told all my kids production and all this stuff, video editing, like it's a pretty good thing to get into, I think. I've learned a lot, but I definitely have a lot to learn. All right, I'm going to pull up all the teams now, and then we'll look at the top projection. I did go through and edit minutes before I went on, and I have the DVP filter on as well, but there will be some minor updates tomorrow, obviously based on news. But this will give you guys an idea of what we're looking at here. So bear with me while I put these all in. Then we'll get into a core, and we'll look at any top betting opportunities that we may have. There are several props that I want to look at on PrizePicks and Underdog this time. Prop market, like I said, is getting a little bit softer. I think now is the time for us to really hammer it, especially with the ungodly variance with fouls and DFS that we've been experiencing. Because, man, Yannick today was unbelievable in 14 minutes. Would have been nice to see him play 30 minutes at like 17% ownership too. That would have been a really fun one. Penn State, man, what a downer game for them too, huh? They almost came back. It's like they played around for too long, but that should have been a pretty easy one for them to win, especially with Peyton Samford playing as kind of, I don't know, passive as he was. Already did that. Let's do this. All right, just bear with me here 1 second. So to recap while we're doing this, Iowa State stack, very viable or viable. Also really like Kentucky. I think those are the two teams that I'm going to have a pretty high amount of. I've been doing the stacking thing lately to try and cut back on variance. Stacks have been working really well. That's something that I've done throughout my playing history in college basketball. Not as much this year, but I have gotten back to doing that, especially with these teams who are so far, with injuries and rotation shrinking down. We've had some pretty good opportunities with that. So I am rolling the mini stacks out quite a bit lately, especially looking at a spot where Kentucky's in a favorable match. North Carolina, all these teams. Getting 2 or 3 pieces of those has been a profitable move. And looking at some of the GPP winners here lately, I've seen a lot of mini stacks there as well. It's just some strategy. This is all stuff we talk about in the Discord as well. Lineup construction, strategy. And in the projection sheet that I post, this is a little more advanced version of it. I do a more basic version that cuts out a lot of this other stuff so that you can copy and paste it into an opto if you want. I also have context notes all over that thing. Why I like a certain play, why, DVP, why is this matchup good, all of that stuff. So it's kind of an article within an article and just a ton of transparency and context that we provide. So for those that are kind of considering coming over or wondering what we offer, that is another part of it that we do. All right, let's do that. All right. So you can see right away the top values that we had talked about at the beginning of the show: Jaden Epps, Guillermo Diaz-Graham, possibly Fred Payne there in the blowout. And then guys like Ish Leggett, Cam Matthews that are buy low spots that we talked about, those projecting quite high. Trey Johnson, also a buy low spot. Arthur Kaluma, see the Kentucky guys there. So it gives you an idea of who's projecting well. Core-wise for me at this moment, Jaden Epps, no secret there. Just have to play. A player like that, you just have to play. It'd be easiest if he would just start. I feel a hell of a lot better about playing him if he was just announced a starter. If they don't start him, there's still that room for him to re-aggravate something or to play only 10 minutes. But right now, we'll core Jaden Epps. I am all over Ish Leggett. I think a pit piece is necessary. Low versus Leggett, I'll just take the discount there. Having trust issues with Guillermo Diaz-Graham, so I'm not going to core him. But obviously, if he gets the minutes, he's a smash. And then the third core member is going to be the DVP spot, Chad Benning. Will be the first and only time I probably make him a core play. I think he'll double as the posh play as well. So we got a lot riding on you here, Chad. Priced at 6.9. You see it at the 31 minutes. I have him right at 4.3x. That's plenty. I think he'll get more than that. The upside is massive in this matchup, and we've seen a ton of players coming into this North Carolina matchup in a kind of like, a cold streak or having some bad games, ugly logs, really break out of that. Efton Reed, the most recent to do so. So I am riding with Chad Benning. All right, let's pull up some best bets here, and then we'll close out. It's almost 1 already. Okay. So here's I have 2 best bets. Tulane versus Rice. Tulane +1 and money line. I'm on Tulane. I've been betting them a lot for better or for worse. And then South Florida is another team that I have been doing a lot of bets with. They haven't always come through for me, but I definitely like them once again. Let's see. They're +5.5 against ECU. That one should be a higher scoring game. It's 143.5 on the total. I actually think the over hits there, but I am taking South Florida +5.5 on that one as well. So those are my 2 best bets. Slight road dogs, but feel pretty good about those. Let's pull up Prize Picks. Share this tab instead. All right. Usually, like I say this every night, but they don't put up the fantasy scores until the next day. That has been one that we've been able to take advantage of. Price Picks softest category has been fantasy projection total. So I've been hitting the fantasy points. The other one is points plus assists, but let's just see what we got here. So Ish Leggett over 16.5 points, like that one for sure. Jaden Epps over 12.5 points, assuming he starts or plays starter minutes once again, like that one for sure. See, RJ Melendez is getting peppered here. That little symbol means that people are betting his number a lot. 9.5 points is fine. Jackson McAndrew over 8 points. This is one that's been really profitable. He's been between 7.5 and 8.5 on all the books, and he usually scores 9 to 10 points with regularity. So Jackson McAndrew over 8 points, another one that I like. Let's see what kind of points plus assist props they're giving us here. So the Kashawn Gilbert over 20.5 points plus assists. That feels pretty good. I think he's destined for a double-double in those 2 categories in this matchup. That's how excited I am about this. And you notice I didn't core anyone in Iowa State, but the core that I just gave you plus at least 1, maybe 2 Iowa State guys is how I'm going to be approaching my main lineup for what it's worth. Otega Awe over 17.5 points plus assists. Now, he's not a big, huge assist guy by any means, but this is one of those categories I've been able to take advantage of because the point totals, they'll be like 14.5 on. I'll look at Otega in a minute, but he gets 2 to 3 assists. He'll score 15 to 16 real points. So it's just been advantageous to take that, even if they're not a big assist guy. That's been one category that I have been able to take advantage of. So this over 17.5 points plus assists for Otega Awe, feel extremely positive about that. Even if he only were to get 1 assist in this spot, I still think it's worth taking it. So over 17.5 points plus assists. Let's go down to some of the night games. TJ Bamba versus Minnesota over 12.5. He usually only hurts my Huskies, but I do like Bamba in this matchup. Let's see tomorrow. Let's go to Missouri. They're playing Ole Miss. Let's go to points here. Tamar Bates points. He didn't hit it for me last time, but he has pretty much hit it in the prior 3. So let's do this. And then we'll head out. 11.5. Yeah, I'm all over that. Over 11.5 points for Tamar Bates. You see, he can build a little bit of room here. His points plus assists at 12.5. And he's not a big assist guy, but still get 2 assists there. I mean, that's worth it. His point total is low enough for me. I'm all over that. That's actually a top 2 or 3 prop on the site for me is Tamar Bates over 11.5. for what it's worth. So I'm a big Tamar Bates fan. All right, I think let's stop this. That's it. We're out here. We did it. Feel pretty good about the slate. We'll get better on the sharing the screen there and everything. But we'll keep like adapting and refining the projections. Pretty much have everything on site. So a few of you that were talking about what the packages are that I showed you, we're only adding more and more stuff. The sim stuff that's taken over DFS, we have all of that too. There's a million simulation stuff on site. We have really accurate ownership projections for NFL and NBA, like some of the most accurate in all of the industry. And you know how important it is to be accurate on ownership. And for collegiate sports, if you're into that, I really truly believe we offer the most intense and expansive amount of content out there. Like I said, the only thing we don't have for collegiate football or basketball is an optimizer, but full projections, full articles, full slate breakdowns, and a very active Discord. Really, really happy with the way things have turned out. You guys' continued support. So before I get out of here, I'll check chat. 3 max, only playing 1 entry. Do I have to play Cooper Flag? It's Duke. I'm guessing Duke is on. I haven't even looked. I'm not gonna lie. I haven't really looked much at the FanDuel slate. I'm guessing Duke is on the main there. I would say no. Here, let me pull it up. You want? God, it's a good matchup against Wake Forest, though. Probably. I want to say no, but probably, because on FanDuel you really do need to get like at least two of the higher end pay-ups into your lineup, and you can brick out on a value or two and still take down tournaments. That was a much more profitable strategy on FanDuel a few years ago, but it still works quite well. So that is a spot for Cooper Flag against Wake Forest that he should absolutely eat. They played North Carolina next Saturday, and there won't be any amount of salary I don't pay for him and Kaman Malawak in that matchup. But yes, against Wake Forest, Cooper Flag is a very strong play. And especially in a contest like that where the book says you should play cash games a certain way and block ownership, makes sense. But I play a little bit differently in those kind of contests. But that is a correct move. So I appreciate you checking us out. Glad you found us. Thank you so much. Getting some DMs from other people that have just found the show tonight. It's awesome that we're still getting that support from new people each and every time. And feel free to circle back around on the on-demand version of the show. If you drop comments, questions, or concerns there, I always drop a reply there. You can also find me on all platforms at DubDeuces85, pretty much anywhere, Twitter, Instagram, all that stuff, Discord, all at DubDeuces85 and at gmail.com. Appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for continuing to support the show. Next week's schedule will be Monday, Tuesday, and Friday. As usual, we'll be running with that schedule for at least another couple of weeks. And then as we get into March and conference tournaments, we'll be going live every single night. It's going to be here before you know it. Blink, and it's going to be Selection Sunday. Appreciate it, guys. Take care. Let's get those green screens and window trips. See you guys on.